Washington, D.C. with Vint Cerf to talk on our Digging into the Future podcast. Vint has been a three-time participant in our podcast. Hasn't been since we were in COVID. You were actually one of our very important speakers during COVID and actually informed a lot of people about the internet and also a lot of the trends that were going on during that period. But welcome back.
Bill, I'm delighted to be back on the program. It's 2025 and we are in the middle of an exploding the technology system. And I'm looking forward to what we can explore about what's happening and what might happen in the future.
We can't wake up in the morning and not think about artificial intelligence right now. It's published. It's everywhere. Is it as big as the days of 2000, or is this? You think it's more hype? What's your thoughts? How would you think about it?
First of all, there's plenty of hype associated with artificial intelligence, but that's been true for over 60 years. Remember that artificial intelligence is not a new idea. The term was invented somewhere around 1956 at Dartmouth University by John McCarthy, who I think at the time was at MIT and later went to Stanford. So that term was introduced that long ago, 70 years ago. And it's been a long path to get to where we are, but it is fair to say that with the kinds of transformational models and multi-layer neural networks that we are in a period of rich exploration of a very, very powerful technology. The scary thing, though, is that it's not yet 100% reliable. Our AI is a diverse technology, and there are different kinds of it. There's one kind of that's predictive. We often call that machine learning. The systems learn complex statistics and they make predictions, and those are very useful. Some of them are predictions for weather, for example, near-term and small-scale weather events, and others, for example, for data center cooling. We train the system to figure out how to cool the data center with the least power requirement. So those are machine learning kinds of examples. The kind of AI that is getting the most hype, of course, is what's called generative AI. And that is simultaneously surprising and scary at the same time. It's surprising because of what it's capable of doing across so many modalities, whether it's text or video or audio or combinations of those. And the scary part is that it doesn't always get it right. And figuring out how to reduce the likelihood that it will get something wrong is important, especially if we're going to rely on it to do something. So I think that the hype is justifiable in the sense of the potential, but it's also a source of real worry for people who would like these things to be safe to use.
Let's talk about one big thing with PTC and obviously with you has also been digital inclusion, right? And so how do we get that billion or so last hangers that haven't gotten onto the internet? Many of them are illiterate, and so there's reasons that they haven't got onto the internet. But how does AI sort of help bridge that, do you think, or does it, or does it accelerate the divide, which some people might say is actually happening as well?
I think your intuition is right that both things are happening at the same time. It's pretty clear that if you can speak and hear, that and even if you can't hear, there's captions. Of course, if you can't read, the captions don't help, and right. So I mean there are some issues here. But the AI-based systems will allow for interaction that might not have worked as well. If you're blind, for example, in today's internet world, screen readers try to help you understand what's going on a web page that you can't see. And it's generally kind of imperfect at that. On the other hand, if you could have a conversation to solve a problem, the AI could help with that. You could have this discussion with the AI agent to explain what it is you're trying to do and have it tell you what the options are. So that's an enabling capability, which I anticipate will make a big difference. There is a digital divide still, and sometimes that divide gets wider instead of shrinking because the people who are already on board are racing ahead to get access to and use of these technologies. And so you're farther behind as they get further ahead. So we have a physical problem to deal with, which is providing access to the internet and the technology that sits on top of it, including AI. And then we have the problem of helping people get to know how to use it or how to provide it, the service. And then there's affordability. And so we have to drive costs out where we can. And then there's accessibility, which you implied in your question. How do we make these systems accessible to literally everyone, whether they are literate or not, whether they can see and hear, whether they have motor problems? And AI looks very attractive for trying to address some of those gaps.
Yep.
And so I think your tuition is right about that.
No, it's interesting trying to, because I mean I spent a lot of time in India trying to think through, you know, how do you, when you go to these villages, that you know, how do you actually help them? And I think it will, but it's going to be interesting to think through all the different permutations.
So if I could just interject one other observation, none of this stuff works without electricity.
Yeah.
And so that is so fundamental to so much of the society that we live in right now, that providing reliable power that's affordable and reliable is really important. And I think we're still struggling to achieve that objective in a lot of the world where power is not reliable and not always available.
Yeah, no, that's true. Let's switch gears a little bit to when I was a student. I was an archaeologist, but my thesis I wrote about at the time when I was in my undergrad. I wrote about how historians actually would have biased, would look at the same event and actually interpret it completely differently.
Yes.
And when you think about AI, you actually have architects of these models that potentially have a bias, right? So, you know, as you think about each one of these models, and then how does that, we're in a world right now where you ask someone, where do you get your news from? And it's an interesting question.
Yeah,
and I would tell you, it would
Yes.
go all over the map. And there's even news agencies that say, oh, this is a leaning left or leaning right article, and you get all these sort of, especially here in the United States. When I was in Hong Kong, it was fairly simple. You didn't have to deal with this stuff. Here in the United States, it's crazy. It's like, but how do you actually get the AI models to be unbiased? You know, and you could argue like the Chinese might have their own interpretation of history,
Yes.
right? And they're training an AI model that has
Yes.
its interpretation
Yes,
of history.
absolutely.
Also has its view of women's rights,
Yes.
gender, you know, other races. I mean, you think about it, like there are all sorts of things being brought in, and then you even think about if the models to be built in the Middle East, how that would actually interpret, like with Sharia law and all this stuff kind of going. I mean, how do you actually make it so that it's agnostic to all this stuff and it actually does the right thing and is neutral?
Well, agnostic might actually be the wrong choice if you wanted to do the right thing by some definition of right, because right is subject to its own set of biases. So the part that the only control that I think we have is the material that's used to train the large language models in the first place. And so that is often very difficult to understand, because if you just go through all the entire content of the World Wide Web, you're going to get a huge range of content, which is going to be contradictory, and some of it will be wrong, some of it will be accurate. And I don't know that the designers of these systems have as much fine-grained control over the quality of the content they use to do the training. In order to achieve some of the objectives of large language models, you need a substantial scope of content I'll use the word educate here. You realize that I'm just using the term. I'm not arguing these things are educable in the same sense as humans are. But finding the right material is not so simple. And there's a potential feedback loop that some of us are worried about. The more the output of these agents or artificial intelligence models gets back into the network, they'll be feeding back on themselves. So now we may get exacerbation of the hallucinations that we already were worried about. So I don't think that, I certainly don't have a good formula for assuring that the content is useful. But I will say attempts to do two things. One, to train on material that is broadly recognized as as accurate and having gravitas, so to speak, is one thing. The second thing that's starting to happen, certainly it does in our models at Google, is that in addition to the large language model that's been trained, when you're interacting with it, it's capable of going out onto the internet and pulling information into what's called a context window. And because the context window influences the way in which data is generated in these models, you get fresh information and potentially get good information, assuming you can figure out which websites have better quality, which again raises questions about how you measure and define quality. So this is an area of enormous importance, and I would say it's still very much a work in progress.
Yeah, we got a few minutes left here, but let's talk about cyber, because obviously cyber is with AI. There's petrol that comes with AI to make it even more the ability to create frauds everywhere, right?
Yes. Well, there's several dimensions to this. One of them, of course, is creating misleading content to cause people to do things they shouldn't do. There's software generation, which we are relying on, and others as well, to produce at Google. Sundar, our CEO, said that about 25% or maybe a little more of our software is now being generated through the help of artificial intelligence agents. Of course, we test this and scrutinize it to a fine degree before we let it into the system. But both software generation and software analysis, identification of flaws and vulnerabilities, might be aided by artificial intelligence. And so the seeds of the problem, of the solution to the problem, may be hiding in the problem, in the sense that the AI can help us build more resilient, more and less vulnerable systems as a consequence of their use. So at least I hope so, because considering the facility to generate code, you would like very much for this to be safer code and more resilient and less vulnerable than otherwise.
Last time we talked, you had just talked about how you had gotten to the Mars rover, and you'd found a way to communicate with it. I was watching we did a podcast during COVID, and it was fantastic, and it was. And at that, you captured the imagination of my 7-year-old son at that time, and it's like, wow, this guy is actually talking to something on Mars, and so I think, but it's come a long way since then. So this is 5-6 years ago. It's now a lot of you were kind of doing an Apollo 13, pull all the pieces together, and now it's real, right?
So certainly the program started in 1998, and I won't try to walk through the entire 27-year history. It started at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, but it expanded to all of the NASA labs, and now it includes the European Space Agency, the Japanese Space Agency, the Korean Space Agency. Standards have been developed by the Internet Engineering Task Force and the Consultative Committee on Space Data Systems in parallel, so they are interworkable, interoperable. A number of different implementations of what's called the Bundle Protocol Suite, which you could think of as the interplanetary equivalent of TCP/IP. Those have all become standardized. Multiple implementations are done. At this stage of the game, a lot of use has been done on the International Space Station. Astronauts are using this to communicate back to Earth. We're using a prototype version of this stuff to relay information coming back from Mars, from the rovers going up through orbiters that have been there for almost, since 2004, so almost 21 years or so. The next phase is the Artemis return to the moon mission. And we expect to be not only on board those missions, but also some of the commercial companies that are responding to the NASA CLIPS program, which is a commercial lunar project effort where they're purchasing equipment and purchasing services from the private sector for their Artemis missions. Those companies are also planning to use the interplanetary protocols as part of the communication system. So here it is, it's 2025. It's reasonable to project that by 2030, we will certainly have communications on Mars, which we already have, and on the moon, and on Earth, and possibly some of the other spacecraft that are going out to the rest of the solar system. So this is a very exciting time to be around. It feels like the Apollo program all over again.
Well, it does. It's. I mean, one of the things you mentioned, I think was fantastic, was you also think that we'll have servers in the sky sooner or later, right? Which is whether it's just what we call edge computing, or whether it's full-on data centers.
These are real data centers. Are the intent of several commercial companies now, for several reasons. First of all, power has been a big issue, and today we talked a lot about the consumption of power by AI systems is significant. When you get into orbit, it's possible to get solar power for free.
Yeah.
And so you may be able to power the data centers with solar power 24 hours a day. And then the only big problem, well, there are many, but one of the biggest problems is getting rid of the heat that the data center would generate while it's in orbit. And so that's a solvable problem. So two things occur to me. One of them is that you get free power. Second, it's reachable by anybody everywhere because it's in orbit. And third, the system is less subject to vulnerability than things that are planet side.
Yep.
So it's not a crazy idea to have data centers in space. There is a lot of interest in doing this on the moon and on Mars as well in order to support human exploration of both of those places, in addition to having them there to manage and control robotic devices as well.
Yeah, no, I think obviously the moon seems like the next target for everyone seems to be that's the next place and where we're headed. Tell me about just to catch up on Vint Cerf. You've been really active in a lot of the new sort of regulatory and intergovernment bodies, right, and trying to help shape U.S. policy, but also just general commercial policy around the world, right, in terms of how we look at things going forward in this kind of new, very, very rapidly changing environment.
Well, I've spent a fair amount of my time, literally this year, working with various UN agencies. The Internet Governance Forum has been around now for 20 years, and it was spawned from the World Summit on the Information Society in 2005. The first meeting of IGF was in 2006. Since that time, a number of other very important things have happened. There is a global digital compact that was agreed by the UN General Assembly just last year, which is a framework in which governments can decide how to interact with each other in the digital space. And we desperately need collaborative and mutually supportive agreements in order to deal with some of the harmful side effects of digital technology, which you and I and everyone else is well aware of. So I've been spending a lot of my time on that. At the UN, a new office was created, the Office of Digital and Emerging Technologies, that's run by Amandeep Gill, and that is a place that's housing the Global Digital Compact, for example. So I've been working very hard with a number of teams trying to shape the World Summit on the Information Society review, which will conclude in December of 2025. And it will determine whether WSIS continues, whether the Internet Governance Forum continues, whether some of the other activities will persist in 2026. There's also emerging other activity, like UNESCO has gotten very interested in not only its traditional science and technology perspectives, but it's also gotten very interested in understanding how well the Internet is serving people's needs. So they have a whole set of metrics, dozens of them, scores of them, that we are encouraging every country to measure in order to assess how well is the Internet serving the populations. And so UN is emerging as a very important element of Internet's evolution, and of course the evolution of applications that sit on top of it.
No, I think it's important, and I think it's. And do you think our current, as we think about America right now, and America's really had a leadership position, I think, in this for many, many years. Do you think we're continuing to lead in that space, or at the UN, is it do we still have the strength? And because I mean, I think if you think about the internet, it was largely focused here in America, and we've actually used it to our benefit in many ways to build 5 or 6 of the largest companies in the world off of the back of it. Do we still have that influence today, or is it more dispersed, or how big of is it? Was there a Chinese internet and an American internet, a set of initiatives? Or
well, the Chinese internet in absolute terms is bigger than the American internet, just the number of people using it and its physical scale. On the other hand, internet is a global phenomenon. I think that the U.S. still has the opportunity to take a leadership position just because of the investments that we've made. But you know, these technologies spread. There are lots of smart people in the world. We're a tiny fraction of the global population, and the incidence of smart people is uniform throughout the populations of the world. One of the main differences is the opportunity that those smart people have. And many of them have emigrated here to the U.S. and taken advantage of the fertile soil in the U.S., intellectual soil, to prosper well beyond what they could have achieved in their home countries. We see this all the time. Look at how many Indian executives there are for our major companies, as an example. So I think the U.S. still has an extraordinary role to play here, but we need to recognize that there are others who will be contributing. The thing I desperately want is for countries to conclude that they should cooperate with each other and not compete with each other. The zero-sum game notion is not helpful for our planet-wide population. It's the win-win that we should be looking for.
It's amazing. We're at a very interesting point in our country's history from both a technology perspective and from a human perspective.
Just think, next year we will celebrate the 250th anniversary of the founding of the United States. And I hope that it makes us very introspective about our history and our future.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting time. As always, a fantastic discussion with Vint Cerf from Google, and really thank you for all of your contributions to PTC, but also to our industry at large. You've been a leader and a thought leader for us, and you're a beacon that we love to tap into as much as we possibly can to learn about how you see things changing in the world. So thank you, Vint, for joining us. We really appreciate your time.
Bill, thank you for the opportunity. Your conversations are always interesting, and I always look forward to them.
Thank you.